Hello and welcome to Beheading the Comics. My name is John Trent. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief at Beheading the Comics. And today we'll talk about Loki Season 1, Episode 4, the Nexus event. Before we get to that, I'd like to ask you to please hit that subscribe button if you are not already subscribed. If you are already subscribed, please make sure you are still subscribed, as YouTube does like to unsubscribe people. And hopefully, by the end of this video, I will have earned your like, and that you will give us a like, and then share this with your friends and family, and that you'll also hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming Loki reviews. With that out of the way, let's get right to this review of Loki Season 1, Episode 4, the Nexus event. I'm going to preface this review by describing this episode as one of the most boring and stupidest episodes of television I have ever watched in my entire life. This was really, really, really bad. Not only was it bad, but it introduces just weird stomach churn. It introduces weird stomach churning romance between Loki and Sylvie. Sick. I think sick is a good word to describe it. But let's start from the beginning. The Nexus event begins with a flashback scene, or rather a memory of Ravonna Renslayer, that takes us to an alternative Asgard where Sylvie is just a little child playing with her Viking boat when the TVA led by Renslayer show up and capture her. They take her through the same process we saw Loki go through in Episode 1, but she is able to get away by pickpocketing Renslayer's timepad device just as she is about to face the judge. She uses the device because apparently only seeing it used once was enough for her to figure out the technology. I guess you can suspend your disbelief on this one, but it's just one of many things in this episode that are just plain dumb. From there, Sylvie apparently goes on the run for years before she eventually discovers she can hide out in Nexus events and then starts her crusade against the TVA. Instead of running from them, she decides to attack. That's right, this little 8 to 10-year-old girl has been running for the TVA for at least 20 to 30 years. And the TVA has not been able to capture her, and it was Renslayer who let her go, and then somehow Renslayer has been promoted up the chain of command of the TVA. Like I said, the whole scene is stupid and doesn't make sense within the context of the show, because she clearly failed in the mission of the TVA and had been allowing this variant to run loose for 20 years or more. And then somehow Mobius is only on the case for seemingly like new, because it seems like her crusade against them is rather new based on the show. So this whole scene basically changes the whole context of the show. It's really bad. It's really bad. Following this memory, Renslayer goes to meet the Timekeepers. There's no actual interaction. We don't actually see her meeting. She just goes into the room, and then the next thing we see is her coming out of the room, and then she meets Mobius, who is waiting for her, and who begins to ask questions about C-20. If you remember, she's the Minuteman who was enchanted by Sylvie back in Episode 2. I didn't like this dialogue whatsoever. It was very in your face, hitting you over the head, like, look, the TVA, there's something up here, there's something weird going on. It's like, no, you already told us that in Episode 3. It's like the one thing you told us in Episode 3 is that all the TVA people are variants, and it was clear from the very beginning that there was something weird going on with the TVA. So they just keep hitting you over the head. They like literally try and hit you over the head with that in this this dialogue between Renslayer and Mobius. Following that conversation, the show shifts back to Lamentus 1, where Sylvie and Loki sit in the middle of an open area as the moon comes tumbling down on the planet. Meteors crash down around them, but they don't show any signs of danger, fear of the meteors hitting them. If you recall, we had a whole set-piece scene where Sylvie and Loki are running from the meteors as they were coming crashing down on this mine. But again, in Episode 3, after they got into the mine shaft and then decided to leave the mine shaft, the meteors stopped being a threat. And again, they're no threat here either. But at the same time, the moon is still like getting closer to the planet and crashing down, and there's bigger and bigger chunks coming crashing down. So again, this is another stupid, dumb setup. Like the whole setup for this scene is dumb and stupid. But then from there, they introduce this weird sexual attraction and romance subplot between Sylvie and Loki. This attraction almost redlines the TVA's sacred timeline meters and allows Mobius to locate them. And obviously, since the sacred timeline meters are going off, it means you can have a Nexus event within a Nexus event. And if you're having a Nexus event within a Nexus event, that completely undermines the whole idea of them locating Sylvie in episode 2. Because if you remember, Loki and Mobius go to Pompeii to try and create chaos within that Nexus event, and they discover that their meters don't go off when he's changing everything, because at the end of the day, that Nexus event is still going to happen. So apparently this sexual attraction and romance is actually sets off another Nexus event within that Nexus event. And to me, that means that all of the exposition they've provided through the 3 episodes so far is completely useless, as it goes out the window, because at the end of the day, according to episode 4, sexual attraction between Lokis conquers all. It's horrid, horrid storytelling. Not only is the storytelling here absolutely terrible, but they try to make the moon breaking apart and crashing into the planet set the mood, set the romance mood. And if you didn't know the moon was crashing down on the planet, the scene, the mood that they try and create is reminiscent of The Little Mermaid when Sebastian sings "Kiss the Girl." It's really sick and twisted. It's super forced. It doesn't make any sense. It just comes out of left field. And the writers just decided we're just gonna throw this in here, and then because this is how we're gonna get them off of this planet. And it's just a terrible idea. After they are captured, they aren't immediately pruned or wiped out of existence for who knows why. Again, this is stupid as well. It's just another contradiction from previous episodes where we see people just get immediately whacked by those eraser sticks. But they don't do that to the 2 Lokis for who knows what. Who knows why. The 2 are separated. Sylvie goes in one room, Loki goes in another. The show follows Mobius and Loki, and we get some horrendous dialogue between the 2. Mobius is just putting down Loki, just insulting him, denigrating him, and Loki doesn't really... he throws some things back, but there's no heart there. There's no truth to what he's saying, and it really falls flat, and I just didn't like the dialogue whatsoever. I didn't like that they were trying to demean Loki, and they do that a lot in this episode. A lot. And then right after you get this horrendous dialogue from Mobius and Loki, Loki gets thrown into this time loop prison, similar to Doctor Strange's battle with Dormammu, where they keep repeating, but instead of facing off against Dormammu, it's Loki facing off against Sif, who has just woken up and discovered that a bunch of her hair has been cut off, and apparently Loki has done that, and then she just confronts him and then punches him a bunch of times, knees him, and it keeps happening over and over again. And this apparently breaks Loki in less than a day. It's truly pathetic and shows just how terrible the show treats Loki as a character. He's nearly unrecognizable as the would-be conqueror of Earth who led a massive alien invasion and almost defeated an entire team of Avengers, plus the combined military might of Earth. I can't emphasize how truly terrible the characterization of Loki is in this episode. Not only is he a lovesick puppy pining over Sylvie, but he's completely weak-willed as well. Never would I have ever described Loki as such before this show. After this Sif scene, the show tries to build mystery off a number of ham-fisted conversations between Mobius and Renslayer, and Mobius and B-15. First, with Renslayer, he's prevented from interviewing Sylvie. It's in this conversation that we get a reason for Loki and Sylvie being kept alive. Apparently, they want to discover the source of the Nexus spike within the Nexus event. However, not allowing your investigator to investigate one of the suspects makes absolutely no sense. The only reason for Mobius not being allowed to interrogate Sylvie is because they have her interact with B-15 later in the episode, and they want B-15 to play the role of hero and not Mobius. It's so obvious what they do here, and it's just really, really bad writing. And it's such bad writing, it goes against the whole bureaucracy of the TVA. So they're fundamentally destroying what they've built with the TVA because they need to prop up B-15 by not allowing Mobius to interview her. It's just terrible. As for Mobius' conversation with B-15, Again, it's all about setting up B15's interaction with Sylvie and to show that she's wavering in her commitment to the TVA. We get another Loki and Sif moment after that conversation, and this is the worst one, as Loki is literally on his knees groveling in front of her and talking about just how terrible a person he is. This is not Loki. This is not Loki at all. It's some husk of a character that they're calling Loki. Next, there's a lot more bad dialogue between Mobius and Loki as Mobius attempts to discover what caused the Nexus spike. There was like one good moment out of this entire conversation, and that's Mobius calls out Loki for his pining of Sylvie in this romantic relationship, and he rebukes him for it, rightfully so. And that was probably the one good thing about that piece of dialogue, that they actually had Mobius rebuke Loki for falling in love with a variant of himself. And then following this conversation, he's tossed back into the cell with the time-looping Sif. The show switches to B15, where she confronts Sylvie about the enchantment she used on her. We find out that apparently the enchantment that Sylvie used was similar to what she used for C20, where she showed her previous memories. B15 then takes her back to Roxcart and allows Sylvie to enchant her again to show her more of those memories. The two then decide to seemingly team up together. However, this is out of character for Sylvie. She's literally at Roxcart and has B15 enchanted. Instead of having her undo the collar that's around her neck and take the time pad device and escape, she remains in custody and puts her faith in B15. It's literally the opposite of everything they showed us about her in the previous episode. She doesn't like to work with others and prefers to work alone because she thinks she is the only person that she can trust. She doesn't trust anyone else. While B15 and Sylvie are off at Roxcart, Mobius is back in Renslayer's office wrapping up the case based off his boring conversation with Loki. However, the case isn't completely closed as they still need to prune Loki and Sylvie, which is delete them, erase them, hit them with a shock stick or whatever. But for some reason, they need to do it in front of the Timekeepers. No explanation why they need to do it in front of the Timekeepers is given. The real reason why they have to do it in front of the Timekeepers is so they can have a final set piece and give you some revelations about who the Timekeepers are. It's, again, another piece of blatantly bad writing, and it's just really stupid. While we have Mobius and Renslayer just wrapping up the case in Renslayer's office, we see more of Mobius starting to doubt the TVA, and in order to try and confirm his own suspicions, he decides to switch time pad devices with Renslayer. He then discovers that Renslayer was lying to him and that C20 was perfectly fine. He watches like an interrogation clip that was on her time pad. And then he decides to betray the TVA and assist Loki. It's an odd move. You would think he'd want to maybe do a little bit of his own investigation instead of trying to spring a felon, or maybe cover his tracks a little bit. For an investigator, he isn't really good. He doesn't really do a good job here at all. And again, this is just so they can kind of write him out, so B15 will get all of the glory at the end. And again, even if you want to just look at it simplistically, for a company man, he turned real quick. Real quick. He wasn't even bribed to turn. He turned because he saw one video. However, Mobius' plan is foiled as soon as it was hatched. Renslayer discovered she had Mobius' device. After she confronts him in the interrogation room, where he's taken Loki out of the time loop Sif cell, Mobius gets pruned right away. Renslayer then proceeds to take Loki along with Sylvie to the Timekeepers. There's a scene in the elevator where Sylvie asks Renslayer what the Nexus event was that caused the TVA to come after her. Renslayer claims she doesn't know. I'm sure that conversation might mean something later, but in this episode, it felt just like filler. I guess you could argue it was more evidence of the TVA being strange, but at this point, did you really need any more? We just saw Mobius get zapped, and we saw that Renslayer was lying to him, so I don't think you really needed that to show the TVA being strange, or show that Renslayer was like affected by whatever's going on with the TVA as well. I think that was pretty clear that all people that work at the TVA were affected. But I guess they wanted to the only thing I can think of is they wanted to specifically make it clear that Renslayer is affected as well. Once they confront the Timekeepers, we find out that you can't even understand what they are saying. I'm serious. I watched this scene twice and still had no idea what the second one says. I had to like rewind it because I couldn't figure out what he was saying. And then I rewound it and I watched it again, and I still had no idea what he was saying. It wasn't until I turned on the closed captioning that I was able to determine what he said. The audio mixing on that was absolutely horrendous. The meeting with the Timekeepers also makes no sense, as the Timekeepers just command the TVA to delete them. Like I said, there's really no reason why they have to go meet the Timekeepers other than to set up this fight scene so that B-15 can come in and save the day. And when they are ordered to delete them, that's when B-15 shows up to save the day. She frees both Loki and Sylvie. And then probably the most idiotic battle of the entire season takes place. So there's literally like, 4 TVA guards in here on top of Renslayer, and then the 3 Timekeepers. And Sylvie, who just like mowed down the TVA guards in the past episode, is actually like struggling against 2 of them. Loki is clearly struggling, but they've shown him getting beat up by a bunch of men before. So I guess you can accept that, but that's literally Loki is fighting against frost giants in the first Thor movie, and he's not getting his butt handed to him. He is a frost giant. He's fought with Thor, and these mere humans are giving him trouble. It's utterly ridiculous how the show depicts him like that, and they do it again here. And they try and like create some tension because they like show that these guys are actually threats when clearly they're not whatsoever. The fight also isn't earned at all. It's so ham-fisted, so obvious, and so clear what's going to happen. Sylvie and Loki eventually win. Sylvie knocks out Renslayer with a fist to the face, and then she throws her sword at the Timekeeper, beheads him. And surprise, surprise, the Timekeepers aren't actually real. It's the Wizard of Oz all over again. They're revealed to be machines. Sylvie describes them as androids. I'm not really sure they know what that word means in this episode, because she describes them as a mindless android. Again, I'm not really, like I said, I don't think they really know what that means, because that makes one question what's going on with Vision in WandaVision. Loki then plans to confess his love for Sylvie, but he never actually finishes, as Renslayer recovers quickly from being knocked out and then prunes Loki in a surprise attack from behind, because none of them are apparently paying attention or didn't realize they needed to detain Renslayer. Sylvie then easily disarms Renslayer and keeps her prisoner, planning to discover what exactly is going on with the Timekeepers. The show then appears to, or the episode then appears to end, but we get a post-credit scene, and Loki is actually still alive, and he wakes up on a planet with an urban hellscape. You see in the background all these skyscrapers that are like kind of falling down. Looks like they've been hit by an earthquake. It's all in disrepair. Things are all like tilted almost, like they're all like Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is kind of weird. And then there he's confronted by what appear to be 4 other Lokis, including Kid Loki, Old Man Loki, Black Loki, who's holding what looks like some steampunk version of Mjolnir. And then there's Crocodile Loki. So this Kid Loki is holding a crocodile that has Loki's horns on its head. And that's probably the most redeeming part of the episode, aside from Mobius calling out Loki for his romance and sexual attraction to his own variant. In conclusion, this episode is actually worse than episode 3. Not only is it boring, but it adds in a hefty dose of stupid to go along with it. The show breaks all of the previous rules it set up for itself, but maybe the most egregious problem with this episode is just how much it destroys Loki's character. He's now a lovesick, mewling, groveling whiner with no backbone whatsoever. The only redeeming aspect of the show is the post-credit scene. I give this episode a 1.5 out of 10. Let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments. My name is John Trent, and you've been watching Bounding into Comics.